Have you ever trusted something so much that you ignored reason, fear, and even your own sanity? The scene is cold. The floor is covered in blood. A man is kneeling, motionless, as if time had stopped around him. His hands are still dripping, red. His gaze? Empty, as if he had already broken inside, even while breathing. He doesn't cry. He doesn't scream. He doesn't try to run away. He just repeats the same phrase like a dark ritual disconnected from reality. I followed the voices. They promised me peace. This story does not begin with a motive. There is no revenge, no declared hatred, no inheritance, jealousy, or anger. It begins with obedience. A silent, blind, and growing obedience. An unquestioning surrender. Like someone who drowns while smiling. His name doesn't matter now. What matters is what he heard and what those voices made him do. The police found no signs of a struggle, no resistance, no sounds of a fight recorded by the neighbors. But the body was there, in the middle of the room, arms open like a sacrifice. The blades used were clean, aligned, placed carefully, as if the crime were a ritual, an act of faith, and it was. During the interrogation, he did not try to defend himself. He did not give alternative versions. He did not show fear. He just waited. He waited to hear again. He waited for them to come back. And when they asked who they were, he smiled. For the first time, they've always been with me, from the beginning. Have you ever felt watched when you were alone? Have you ever felt like there was something next to you, even when you were silent? Have you ever heard a thought that didn't seem like yours? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover now might surprise you. Maybe it will bother you, or worse, remind you of something. When the psychiatrists evaluated the case, they found too many gaps. It wasn't just schizophrenia. It wasn't just delusion. It was profound obedience, a faith that didn't fit into diagnoses, a dedication that seemed ancient, almost inherited, as if he had been prepared his entire life for this moment. But why? Why would anyone surrender their mind, body, and will to voices that no one else hears? The answer may lie where it all began, or where it all ended. And what comes next may be even more disturbing. His childhood was marked by silences that were too long, locked rooms, whispers in the dark. His mother said he had something special, but it was always with a look of fear, as if she sensed she had created something she didn't understand. At the age of 7, he began to write things that he could not remember later. Entire sentences on pages torn from old notebooks, repeated words, names that no one knew. At the age of 9, he began to isolate himself for hours, staring into space as if he were hearing something coming from inside the wall, and then the request came. Small at first. Don't eat today. Don't talk to anyone at school. Be quiet. And he obeyed. Always. Have you ever felt like something was wrong, but you couldn't explain it? Have you ever felt like you were being guided by something you didn't fully understand? If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you the most so far. Your perspective, your experience, or even your discomfort with what you just heard can help us understand together what is behind these stories. Because it's not just about him. It's about what resonates within all of us. And if this type of content captivates you, provokes you, or makes you think differently, like this video, it shows that it's worth continuing to bring these stories that no one wants to tell. Each like shows that there's someone out there on the other side, listening. And if you want to dive deeper, subscribe to the channel now. Because here we don't close our eyes to the dark, we face it head on. Your subscription helps this content reach more people, and keeps this community alive that isn't afraid to listen to what many prefer to keep quiet. But back to it. At 14, the voices asked for the first impossible thing, and what he did next can never be undone. He slept with his face covered, not because he was afraid of the dark, but because of what came from inside him when everything outside went silent. The house was small. The thin walls let in every muffled, moan from his mother in prayer, and every explosion from his father breaking bottles in the kitchen. It was a spiritual battlefield, or at least that's how he learned to name the chaos that lived there. On one side, the cross hung on the wall, always turning slightly as if watching everything. On the other, the constant smell of alcohol, tobacco, and fear. He grew up between two gods, one that asked for silence, the other that asked for blood. His name didn't matter at home. It was psst, it was be quiet, it was we'll deal with this later. He grew up learning that feeling was wrong, crying was provocation, talking was defiance. So he fell silent. He slowly faded away, like a candle, lit in a locked room. School was a distant noise. He was almost never there. His body, yes. But his mind was far away. Somewhere where he could close his eyes and the voices spoke softly, almost like a caress. The first voices came to the 6 of them. They were almost indistinguishable from thoughts. Small instructions, simple things. Go to the corner. Don't answer. They'll laugh at you. No one noticed, because he was already invisible, and deep down, maybe that was a blessing. It was better to talk to the invisible than to be seen by real monsters. His mother said he was special, but always in a strange way. One time she found him standing in the backyard staring at the sky, as if he was waiting for something to fall from there. She made the sign of the cross, took him inside and lit a candle in the room. Then she prayed for an hour, without looking at him, as if she was trying to erase a presence. He noticed her gaze change, between pity and distrust, between affection and fear. The father, he had already given up on everything. Sometimes he would come back from the street with his eyes, downcast, stumbling, and would only say one thing before collapsing on the bed: "This boy is not going to make it." No hugs, no gestures of pride, just silence banging on doors and the smell of defeat permeating the corners of the house. His childhood was shaped by absences, absence of touch, absence of questions, absence of listening. And when everything around you ignores you, the mind seeks refuge in the only place where you still exist, within yourself. He began to believe that those voices were part of him, or rather, that he was part of something bigger, something that whispered when everything else was silent, something that understood him when no one else cared. They told him that he was different, that there was a plan, that this pain had a purpose. Over time, he not only listened, but responded. In secret, under the blanket, he talked to them. He didn't see faces, but he felt presences. His head felt light, as if he were somewhere else. And that was better than being there. Much better. No one ever asked him why he was silent for so long, or why he drew eyes everywhere. In notebooks on the walls of his room, even on his arm, when he had a pen in hand. They were open eyes, watching, witnessing, and/or guiding. He called them the guardians. As the years passed, the whispers began to change in tone. They were no longer innocent advice. Now they were demanding, judging, testing. "Do you trust us?" they asked. "Then prove it." It was as if they were preparing him, step by step, peeling away his layers of humanity one by one, as if sculpting something new, something colder, cleaner, more obedient. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. At the age of 12, he went through an episode that, even today, no one in the family talks about. His 3-year-old sister was found locked in the closet, shaking with bruises on her arms. The mother said it was an accident, that she was playing hide and seek. But the girl never spoke to him again. She never even looked him in the eye again. After that, the voices became clearer, more present. He began to write down what they told him, sheets and sheets of instructions. Don't trust your mother. He'll try to stop you. Your body is just an instrument. No one read it. No one cared. His mother just said, "A quiet boy lives longer," and he fell silent. Comment here. That makes sense to me. The first time was strange. A whisper cut through the silence of the room like a blade in the dark. "Turn left. Now." He hesitated, but he obeyed. 2 seconds later, the speeding car ran the red light without braking. If he had gone straight, the impact would have been fatal. It was at that moment that something inside him snapped, or maybe it molded. The line between miracle and madness blurred. There was no one in the back seat, but he heard it clearly, and he survived. What do you do when the voice that saves you also starts dictating the rules? Confidence is born of survival, and survival is addictive. The human mind has a frightening ability to transform trauma into ritual. From then on, every decision became a whisper. Banal choices became commands. Don't talk to him. Wait 5 more minutes. Look out the window. At first it felt like protection. Then it felt like control. But it felt good. Strangely good. Like someone was finally paying attention to him. Like for the first time he was part of something bigger, something invisible, something that gave meaning to the old pain. This blind obedience is not born of fear but of need. A mind scarred by abandonment learns to trust too quickly when it believes that someone or something cares. It doesn't matter whether this presence is real or imaginary. What matters is that it responds. The voices didn't scream. Never. They spoke calmly, just like his mother whispered prayers in the next room, never looking him in the eye. That silent connection, that thread between faith and insanity, grew tighter every day. He began to see patterns, signs, sounds that repeated themselves, numbers that returned, specific words in other people's conversations like codes. Everything seemed to have a hidden purpose, and as he realized this, something inside him awakened. It wasn't just obedience, it was a mission, but a mission without a name, without a clear objective, just fragmented orders, scattered through time like loose pieces of a sick puzzle. And yet, he continued, without question, without refusing. Obeying became a relief. Thinking too much brought pain. To decide for himself was to risk breaking the pact. He began to write down instructions, entire notebooks filled with sentences that seemed to come straight out of a dream. Be silent today. Don't go into that room. Take the red object. Be wary of the man in blue. The words came out of nowhere but echoed loudly, and he, without realizing it, was moving away from the real world. Little by little, friends disappeared. Family became a distant noise. Even his own image in the mirror began to look different. The scariest thing is, the orders worked. Every time he obeyed, something happened. A bizarre coincidence, an unlikely encounter, an accident avoided, an opportunity arising out of nowhere. It was as if the voices knew what was coming, as if they foresaw every turn along the way. He didn't know if he was protected or manipulated, but he felt alive. Finally, alive. The human mind, when wounded too early, desperately searches for a logic that will make sense of the pain. And when you find it, you never let go, even if that sense comes from a dark place. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because from the moment he started testing the limits of these orders, something changed. The voices grew impatient. The instructions, more aggressive, and the line between obedience and punishment became dangerously thin. Comment here. That makes sense to me. Just so I know who else has felt that some decisions weren't really theirs. At first, she was just a shadow behind the curtain, a still figure on the edge of the dream. But her eyes, those eyes, were already there, closed, but alive, as if they were waiting for something, as if they carried a truth he wasn't yet ready to hear. On the third night, she spoke. Her voice was soft, almost motherly, but there was something wrong with that softness, something that was seeping slowly, like poison on silk. Obey, and the weight will disappear. She didn't shout. She didn't demand. She just offered forgiveness, redemption, eternal silence. It was strange, because, as calm as the tone was, there was something underneath that felt like a threat, like a deal that seems too fair, like a door that opens by itself late at night. Even so, he accepted. The figure in white began to appear more frequently, sometimes at night, sometimes in the moments between waking and sleeping. Always still, always close. The face never fully visible, but the feeling, always the same: relief. It was as if she carried an ancient promise, something he had already forgotten but which his body still recognized. After a few weeks, the commands changed their tone. Before, there were simple instructions. Now, there was a script. Go to the park. 3:17. Take the envelope. Don't read it. Just burn it. He did just that. And as the ashes vanished into the wind, she appeared more clearly, as if each obedience cleared the veil that hid her, as if each wrong choice he avoided was a key turning inside something invisible. It wasn't madness. It was a journey. It was transformation. The female figure seemed to know his deepest guilt. She knew the names he didn't say. She knew the memories he tried to drown in silence. She didn't judge, but it demanded obedience. He didn't understand why he was so trusting. Maybe because, for the first time, someone saw him from the inside, and that, to a wounded mind, is worth more than logic. The voices were coming from her now. Clearly, no more loose whispers, but complete sentences, loaded with hidden meanings. She spoke of forgiveness, as if delivering poison in a golden cup. He spoke of peace, like someone who had seen chaos from within. And he believed. Because by obeying, the world outside became less dense. Old pains lost their strength. The faces of the past stopped, haunting him in the mirrors. The woman in white was his guide, his redemption. But a part of him began to suspect, because peace came at a cost. Silence. I could no longer tell anyone what I heard. Not about my dreams. Not about her. They won't understand. They will take you away from me. They are afraid of what you are becoming. And he, once again, obeyed. He walked away from everything. He was silent, trusted. It was in this isolation that he noticed something strange. The figure in white did not only appear in dreams, it began to appear in reflections, in windows, in deserted corridors, always still, always watching. But now, closer. She became part of everyday life, like a shadow stuck in the routine, like an ancient presence that had finally returned, and with it came revelations, secrets about people close to you, details he could never have known on his own, phrases that had only been said behind closed doors, but that she repeated with precision. It messed with him, because now it wasn't just faith. It was evidence. It was real impact. It was access to a hidden truth. The woman in white said he had a purpose, that everything he had experienced up until then, the losses, the traumas, the silences, were rehearsals for what was to come. She didn't reveal everything at once. He dripped information like someone feeding a hungry mind, and he drank in every word as if it were an answer. He tried to question, but whenever I doubted, something bad happened, an accident, a loss, a disturbing dream that made him wake up screaming. He soon understood that obedience brought peace. Questioning brought pain. It didn't take long for him to see her as the only way out, the only one that made sense, the only one that filled the void. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because when he started asking about who she was real, the answers that emerged began to change everything he believed until then. And maybe what she represented was much darker than he was prepared to accept. Write it down. I'm on this journey too, just to know if you also feel that some presences don't appear by chance. At first, it was just a gesture, a silent test of fidelity, a whispered order from the woman in white, who came shrouded in mist, with eyes that didn't judge. They just waited. The boy obeyed. An animal disappeared. That night, no one asked. No one noticed. But inside him, something began to break, as if reality no longer required justification, as if right and wrong were just noises from a world that was no longer part of him. The feeling wasn't guilt. It was a lightness, like lifting a stone off your chest. And that was what it promised. Lightness. With each obedience, the silence grew inside. Not the external silence, but the kind that cancels out the internal scream. The kind of silence that swallows up chaos. He slept well that night. For the first time in months. The following week she came back. This time, brighter, closer. She touched his shoulder, without saying a word, and pointed. A strange man passed by every day on the sidewalk in front, always watching, always waiting. No one knew him. The boy knew without having to hear it he was next. And again the same silent choice, obey or continue to suffocate. He obeyed. The police report said it was an accident. The man fell onto the train tracks. But there are records that indicate otherwise. Witnesses who saw someone running away wrapped in a hood. A young figure who disappeared into the fog before anyone could follow. No cameras caught his face. No real clues. But there was a diary, a notebook hidden under the floorboards where he recorded everything, with codes, drawings, broken sentences, a sick but lucid pattern. First the dog, then the stranger. I am at peace. I am clean. There was no remorse. There was method. As if each obedient act cleansed the soul. The woman in white now appeared even when he was awake. Reflection in shop windows, shadow in half-open doors, the scent of lilies in places where there were no flowers. Some would say delusion, others would say demonic influence. But what no one can explain is how his behavior became functional. Better grades in school, fewer panic attacks, fewer nightmares, as if destruction became the medicine. This is where the truth begins to distort. Because school records show a clear improvement in performance. Teachers report that students are more focused, more present. But absences from home have increased. Neighbors have noticed strange movements in the basement of the abandoned house across the street. A place no one has been since the fire 3 years before. But there were noises, and lights, and sometimes the smell of burning iron. The notebook had a new note. The body must be the mirror. The mirror must be empty. The emptiness must be obeyed. It doesn't make logical sense, but emotionally it does. As if his mind were creating a new language, based on repressed pain, unresolved trauma, and a brutal desire for control. Because there, in that ritualistic chaos, he was the master of his own silence. And most disturbingly, the more he destroyed, the calmer he became. Less screaming, fewer nightmares. Inner peace began to crystallize, atop the rubble of sanity. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this isn't just the story of a boy and his visions. It's a journey into what the human mind tries to bury, and what happens when what we bury learns to dig back up. Behind the scenes of the investigation, connections emerge between the drawings in the notebook and ancient symbols used in emotional purging rituals. Images that were not part of any textbook but that appear in 19th century occult texts written by reclusive monks. Treatises that speak of the transfer of sin by symbolic action. Is it possible that the boy was unconsciously recreating an ancient spiritual survival mechanism? Or was it conditioned by something beyond common understanding? The marks in the basement suggest he wasn't the one drawing. The lines were too thin, the curves too precise, and they were always done with red ink, which wasn't ink. One of the investigators, a skeptic until then, confessed in an internal statement that he had a dream about the woman in white after visiting the place. He did not tell anyone for fear of ridicule, but he did say, She said that I could be cleansed too, if I had the courage. The boy's transformation didn't stop there. He began avoiding mirrors. He tore up old photos, and he wrote in crooked letters on his bedroom wall, "I can only exist until I see myself." These decisions reveal a mindset shaped by the weight of something greater than itself, as if there were a psychic entity occupying the space that was once only pain, a presence that provided relief but exacted a high price, and every obedience had a price. But contrary to what one might expect, he wasn't the one paying. The notebook contained the list: names, dates, places, all real, all connected to minor incidents in the neighborhood, missing pets, elderly people found dead in their homes, a baby who mysteriously stopped breathing in his crib. The line between influence and execution has become thin and dangerous. At that point, the official investigation stalled, but unofficial records continued because there was something bigger at stake: the impact of what happened on those who came close. Whoever read the notebook began to listen. Whoever entered the basement began to see. Whoever touched the symbols lost sleep. And the boy, now with sunken eyes and rare speech, began to write just one word, repeated hundreds of times on every page: obey. Comment. This makes sense to me, because the next step of the descent was already written, before he was even born, and when the screams stopped, he didn't tremble. He didn't hesitate. He just stared into space like someone waiting for something that never comes. The stranger, the one who had guided him in his first steps, was no longer there. But it didn't make any difference. The absence didn't scare him. The silence filled him. It was as if everything was finally in order. He said that guilt was an invention, that remorse was the break of the weak, and that true freedom only comes when the conscience stops screaming. His gaze, once agitated, now carried an almost childlike peace, but a dirty peace, built on bones and blood. At the police station, he didn't ask for a lawyer, or water, or an excuse. He just said, "You only arrived because I wanted you to," and that affected everyone. He had created not just a crime sequence, but a choreography. Every step rehearsed, every scene staged. It wasn't disorganization, it was the aesthetics of horror. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject because his mind didn't feed only on pain, but on the symmetry of chaos. There is a huge difference between someone who makes a mistake and someone who chooses to dive into the shadows with their eyes wide open. And he dived in, head first, without a rope. There's something about this type of person that we recognize from afar, and at the same time we want to pretend we don't see it. The way he chose his victims, the way he prepared the environments. Everything revealed a mind that not only wanted to kill, but to provoke, to leave an invisible signature, a hidden message, a mind game that few would be able to decipher. And the most disturbing thing? He left clues, small ones, almost imperceptible, as if challenging whoever was on the other side. A cold message: if you're smart enough, you'll understand. This is exactly why this content cannot be watched halfway. You have to see it through to the end, because what comes after that not only changes everything you thought you knew, it also reveals the most hidden and craziest part of the story. This kind of material doesn't come along all the time. Most people don't have the stomach for it. But if you've come this far, it's because something inside you feels like you need to understand what's behind those layers. So, if this universe captivates you, if this type of revelation transforms you, sign up now. Not because everyone is asking for it, but because you don't want to miss out on what's yet to come. The ending is the most shocking part, and only those who stay until then will understand why. Comment here: I'm on that journey too. It wasn't random. It never was. The victim was close. Close enough to know where he grew up. Close enough to have seen his eyes still clean, years ago, before the fracture, before the total surrender. Close enough to trust. And for that very reason, perfect. It was night, almost dawn, The city was asleep while he walked calmly. No rush, no hesitation. The parking sensors recorded everything. The sound of his footsteps, the exact moment he stopped behind her, the knife that appeared like an extension of his own arm. Fast, silent, surgical. Her body didn't even fall immediately. There was a second of suspension in the air as if time had frozen, and then came the collapse, a dull sound, and then absolute silence. But what was captured on camera was not just the brutality of the act. It was the look in his eyes, a look without tremor, without remorse, without any humanity. It was as if he was surrendered, not to anger, not to pleasure, but to something greater, something he could no longer control. He kneels beside the body, not to check if she was dead, but to observe, like someone contemplating a finished work, like someone finishing a stage of a greater plan. During the interrogation, days later, they asked him why. He responded with a phrase that never left the investigators' minds, because she was the last part that was still holding me here. This sentence opened up a chasm of interpretations, but what had the most impact was not the content. It was the way he said it, without anger, without pain, without fear, just conviction, as if he had cleaned a dirty mirror. It was clear then, he was no longer someone trying to contain himself. He had crossed the point of no return, and the most frightening thing? Everything seemed calculated. The choice of the location without witnesses, the precision of the cuts, the positioning of the body. Even the time of the crime matched the moment of least movement in the building. He didn't commit murder. He carried out a decision, a step, part of a sequence. And when forensics analyzed the data on his computer, they found more than research. They found a map, a timeline, a script. The victim was the focal point, the intersection, the turning point. Everything that came before was preparation, and everything that came after would be consequence, transformation. This is where the story begins to twist, because the case is no longer just a police case. It is a study of choices, of identity, of how a mind can adapt to chaos until it seems routine. He didn't just accept what he had done, he believed it was necessary. The recordings he left behind are disturbing. In one of them, he says, "You don't know who you are until you cut through everything that anchors you." This phrase became a symbol of a strange phenomenon. People began to study the case as if it were a kind of metaphor, a silent cry against the constraints of society. But this only revealed another layer, the human thirst for meaning even in horror. At the trial, when they showed the crime scene footage, there was an unexpected reaction. One member of the jury fainted. Another began to cry uncontrollably. The prosecutor called a pause, but he, sitting in the dock, just watched, with his eyes fixed, as if he were reliving every second. Not with pain, with surrender. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because when we look from the outside, everything seems absurd. But on the inside, he built logic. He truly believed that he was cleaning, cutting out the excess, leaving only the essential. And in that essential, there was no room for anyone else. The most disconcerting thing? This wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a cold-blooded decision, with no apparent motivation of profit, revenge, or passion. It was almost like a ritual, a symbolic sacrifice, as if that death represented the end of one part of him and the beginning of another. He burned his clothes, he changed his appearance, he erased his digital traces, but he didn't run away. Because he wanted to be found, he wanted them to know, he wanted them to understand, he wanted them to see what he had become. This murder was not the climax, it was the opening. Comment there. That makes sense to me. He remained silent as the sirens approached. He walked to the police car without looking up. No seconds were wasted in reaction or regret. The handcuffs slid onto his wrist, and still he remained motionless. In the back seat, the officers stared at each other, disconcerted. They expected screams, resistance, an explosive confession. But nothing happened. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He didn't say a word until they reached the police station. During the journey, he remained motionless, like a skeleton of skin, his eyes fixed on the void he had always inhabited. Dozens of flashes, cameras, reporters, but he saw no one. He heard nothing but a distant whisper. The one who had always been with him. The one who never failed. At the entrance to the deposition room, they offered him water. He took the glass, looked inside, and then at the agent. He wasn't thirsty, just curious. He needed to know if she would come. And then he asked quietly, almost inaudibly, "Will they come with me?" The sentence cut through the room. Everyone froze. Questions piled up, but no one answered. It was as if the mind's technical support didn't know how to deal with those who still called out through voices. No lawyer, no public defender. He declined any legal assistance. He said he didn't need it, that there was no material evidence to contest it. And he remained in the dock, calm, with a serene smile, the smile of someone who believes he is a reflection of something greater than the audience, something that transcends human understanding. He felt no remorse. Remorse, to him, was freedom from doubt. He did not want freedom. He wanted relief. And that relief came from silence. Every heartbeat resounded like deep music. Every sigh a testimony to what was inside him. Absence, open space, and control. Control of body, control of speech, control of fear. He found something in his eyes that frightened even the most experienced. It wasn't hate, it wasn't madness, it was surrender, a conscience that decided to keep quiet. He understood at some point in his journey that only by completely obeying would he be able to maintain the coherence of his own internal narrative. Chaos needed to be tamed, and he offered himself as its shepherd. As the police chief ate a cheese bread, he remained impassive. He watched the guards arrange the procedure magazines, heard the distant voice of someone reciting information from the bulletin, but he didn't seem to absorb any of these mundane realities. He wasn't there. He was in a place where there was no light, no noise, no time, just a spectator and an observer, observing himself. In his testimony, he recorded only a few short sentences. Closed answers. No justifications, no justifications. No stories, only confirmations. He accepted all the accusations, without rebuttal, without demanding reconsideration, without showing any humanity whatsoever, only conviction. The absurd conviction that silence gave him back. For the investigators, it was a shock. Extremely shocking. Arriving at the police station and finding that cold, emotionless face made many question the sanity of the case. It was impossible to define whether it was an echo of pain or the result of a profound transformation, building a personality alien to the child's initial traits before she heard voices. Meanwhile, the family waited. Some were in shock. Others still believed it was part of a hoax. Because how can one explain the smile? How can one justify calm in the face of horror? The coldness of someone who, instead of collapsing, remains intact, upright, clean. "If I die, take them with me." He said this later at night. He whispered it to one of the authorities, also psychologists. The voice still nagged. He wanted answers that were not given, but already known. It was a prayer without a destination, a declaration of ownership. They belong to me, and they will remain. The investigation continued, but no warrant was immediately served. There was no resistance. There was no full confession. He did not give names. He did not talk about agendas. He limited himself to responding to the forensic experts' requests, maintaining the coherence of his macabre monologue and displaying a smile that begged to be decoded. Was it laughter or resignation? And then the rumors began. Empty trucks, parked nearby at night, traces of red paint on the police station floor, an unlit candle in the corner of the judge's chambers, cleaning agents found in clear crevices, small incidents that couldn't be attributed to him, but that suggested that perhaps he was closer than anyone thought, that perhaps obedience didn't end in the cell. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because that prison was not a prison. It was a camp, a testing ground, a shadow theater. And what is really behind that smile is something we have not yet been able to define, something that goes beyond criminality and enters the realm of psychological possession, of spiritual transformation disguised as rational choice. And the impact of all this goes far beyond what he did. It affects those who observe. The mind that saw and tasted this dead calm, the distorted mentality that mistook cold for peace, the internal cameras, the reports, and even the prayer contained in the clandestine silence. Everything becomes part of a bigger picture. A picture that begins to question the backstage of what we consider consciousness. And the question that many have not yet dared to ask is this: what was there, in addition of the boy who obeyed? And what was still behind the smile that no one dared to challenge? Comment. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because it was there in that room, suffocated by cold lamps and long silences, that the lie gave way to the impossible. He didn't blink. His gaze cut straight through. There was no hesitation or calculation, just the delivery of a cold truth, which no one asked for but which he insisted on saying. His voice seemed out of time, as if each word had been rehearsed years ago. He tilted his head slightly, as if listening to an inner secret, and said, "The body is not the last." Silence. The investigator didn't understand right away. He wrote it down. Then he looked up. That wasn't in the script. All the reports, all the evidence, everything pointed to one outcome, one victim. But he threw the phrase out like someone lighting a fuse and waited. There's more, and you haven't even come close. The sentence hung heavy in the air like a dry punch. The prosecutor, observing everything behind the mirrored glass, dropped his pen. That changed everything, because until then the timeline was clear. The cycle seemed closed. But now, he was insinuating that there was another scenario, one off the radar, a hidden body, or worse, a plan in progress. He didn't explain where or when. He just left it in the air that you knew. And what was most frightening was not the possibility of there being another victim, but the fact that he was absolutely calm as he told it. No guilt, no urgency, no trace of empathy, just the grim satisfaction of someone carrying a powerful secret. The agents looked at each other. One of them got up, left the room, and asked for the full history of the previous investigation. They cross-referenced dates, places, names, and everything matched. There was no way he could have known details that had not been released, like, for example, the broken blue collar that had never been found at the crime scene, or the dog that barked every morning in the lot next door. He described it precisely and added, "You think you buried everything, but you forgot the most important part. What was left above ground. It was a riddle. But it didn't seem symbolic, it seemed factual. Something he had seen, experienced, or participated in. But it wasn't in any official records. And that opened a deep crack in the case. Either they were facing a grotesque error in the investigation, or he was part of something much bigger. They went to the place, an abandoned farm 11 km from where the first body had been found. The vegetation was thick. There was no recent sign of human movement. But near the fence, a dirty cloth tied to a branch gave something away. And most disturbing, nearby, a cross made of branches, planted precisely, like a mark, like a reminder. The excavation was immediate, and what they found there confirmed what he had said, a body. But it was not from the same period. The estimate indicated at least 7 years earlier. The bones were incomplete, the jaw was missing, and next to the remains a piece of laminated paper held together with adhesive tape inside a bottle, with 3 handwritten words, "It's not the last." The police froze. This was no coincidence. Someone had prepared that message, someone who knew exactly how to provoke, and what's more, someone who was in control even years later. When they came back to question him, they expected him to react, to show pride, to at least blink. But he just smiled, the same serene smile as before. A smile that doesn't celebrate, it just confirms. She showed me where she was. I just repeated what I saw. Nobody understood. Who was it? An accomplice? A witness? An invention? But he didn't explain. He never explained. He only said that the voice came when the night moves. This is how he described it. When the night moves. As if darkness had its own movement. As if evil had rhythm. The psychiatric reports arrived days later, and they brought more questions than answers. No clear disorder, no clinically functional dissociation, no trace of overt delirium. He was sane, perfectly conscious. And yet, he saw what no one else saw. He knew what no one else knew, and he spoke to people who no one else would listen to. That's when investigators began to suspect something beyond crime, beyond logic. They began to map patterns. They went through old files from other cases and they found strange connections, similar dates, repeated places, common objects, a triangle of places where children had disappeared over the last 20 years. Always in the same month, always between the 7th and the 14th, and among the reports a sheet with no author, just a scribbled sentence. He only wakes up when she sleeps. What was that? A metaphor? A code? Or the ultimate clue? All of this opened a new investigation, parallel, silent, hidden even from official channels. Because the details that emerged could not be explained in ordinary words, and much less made public. It was as if they were opening a closet that should not be touched. A closet full of buried decisions, hidden truths, and mindsets distorted by pain. But the strangest part was yet to come. Because on the interrogation tapes, when they replayed the audio to listen to the phrase about the body again, they found something that no one had noticed before. Exactly the second he says it's not the last, an electronic interference invades the microphone, like a low hiss. An oscillation that no one heard live, but that was recorded. And when the sound is amplified, a second voice, almost imperceptible, is heard overlapping his, as if there were an echo, but with a slight delay, as if another person were repeating what he said, milliseconds later. It wasn't a technical problem. The equipment was intact, but that sound shadow didn't appear anywhere else in the recording. Just there, in that sentence. The technicians spent days trying to explain. They called audio experts, sound engineers, but nothing. Until one of them said something that froze the room. It's not interference, it's a layer. One layer. What if it wasn't just him talking? If what came out of his mouth was shared by another source? As if the same idea, the same thought, was being transmitted in duplicate. These questions began to haunt the backstage. The agents stopped sleeping properly. The police station changed shifts. The reports began to be delivered with less detail, because no one wanted to admit it. Out loud, it was already clear. They were dealing with something that escaped method, something that was not limited to rationality. One of the experts wrote in a note left anonymously on the table, "What this guy carries didn't just come from childhood." And that changed the way they began to see everything. No longer as a criminal, but as a host, as a point of contact. Someone who crossed an invisible line and never came back. Comment there. That makes sense to me. He asked to be left alone. The voice, a whisper filled with unexpected calm, cut through the heavy silence of the cell. I want to hear one last time. It was no ordinary request. It was not just a desire for comfort or empty words. It was an invitation to the abyss, to that hidden truth that only he could touch at the end of the line. The world outside seemed distant, an indifferent shadow, while inside that cold space time stood still. At that moment, no one knew what he would hear. Maybe it was the murmur of the ghosts he carried, or the words of a past that insisted on haunting him until his last breath. What they said to him was locked away in the silence of the backstage, far from curious eyes and voices eager for answers. A secret, one more layer in this already tortuous journey which would never be fully revealed. But there was something that stuck with me. The final smile. A strange, unsettling smile. It wasn't one of relief. It wasn't one of redemption. It was a smile that brimmed with irony and deep disdain, as if he knew the game was far from over. That even at this extreme moment, there was one last piece on the board that no one saw. A hidden move, a decision that escaped common understanding. That smile, captured in silence, challenged anyone who looked to understand the weight of that expression. It carried the impact of an unspoken truth, an inner transformation that happened at the exact moment the body surrendered to the inevitable. The mentality of a man who had crossed all limits and who, in the final act, seemed to have found an invisible point of resistance, a final decision made in the dark, far from view. It's strange to think about how life comes down to moments like these, final decisions full of pain and mystery, where the truth seems to escape, where time itself bows before something bigger and heavier than any sentence. What really matters, when everything is about to end? Is it the confession, the partial revelation, or the eloquent silence that comes right after? The impact of that last hour reverberates far beyond the cold walls of the prison. It is a journey that leaves traces, questions that multiply, and a shadow that continues to grow. He carried invisible baggage, scars that cannot be seen but that shaped his destiny. Traumas buried, lies told to himself, truths distorted in order to survive. The execution was not only an end, but a gateway to revelations that would never be fully exposed. That is where the complexity lies, between what he said and what was left hanging in the air, between what the world saw and what the world dared not hear. What if the final smile was more than an expression? If it was a warning, a riddle left behind, a clue to a hidden truth that should never have come to light? The human mind is a dark territory, especially when shaped by extreme decisions, where the weight of the past and the uncertain future mingle in a haze of mystery and pain. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject. The complexity of this final moment goes beyond the execution scene. It is about understanding the internal transformation that occurs at the moment when a human being is confronted with his own finitude. How does the mentality of someone hanging by a thread react to the proximity of death? What are the thoughts, fears, and desires that cross that final frontier? It is not just a physical issue. It is an emotional and psychological battle that few can imagine. The backstage of this final moment is little explored because it carries a burden of mystery and dangerous revelations. It is as if the silence surrounding death itself carries a coded message, a fragmented truth that defies logic and conventional justice. The impact of this moment goes beyond the scope of crime and punishment. It touches on the essence of the human condition, its fragility, and the complexity of the decisions that define us. Within this scenario, new questions arise about the journey he lived, about what really happened beyond the official version. What secrets did he know? What deep wounds were excavated along the way? It is a game between light and shadow, between what is revealed and what remains buried in the densest layers of the human soul. What lies behind that last smile? The answer may lie in the duality of the human condition, in the mixture of fear and courage, in the silent resistance in the face of the end. There is a transformation that few can see, but which is decisive in understanding the real impact of that moment. What changes in a man who faces death with disturbing calm? How does this affect the narrative that the world tells about him? This moment, so brief and intense, is an invitation to delve into the backstage of the criminal mind, to understand that the truth is not only what is seen on the surface, but what is hidden in the shadows of memory and emotion. And these shadows hold secrets that can transform our understanding of justice, punishment, and the very nature of evil. Comment there. That makes sense to me. That final smile was not the last secret. After the last breath, the absolute silence that everyone was expecting, the game changed. The execution seemed to have closed the cycle, buried the story, erased the questions. But what no one knew, or even suspected, was that the darkness had another card up its sleeve. Literally, an anonymous letter, delivered to the police station, appeared days later, with details that only those who were there, who heard those voices or perhaps something else, could reveal. A parallel, obscure script that rewrote what was imagined as closed. And it was not just any letter. It was a living fragment of that mystery that refused to die. The contents of the letter cut like a knife. Cruel, minute details that could only come from within, from someone who knew too much, or who perhaps had access to the same voices that tormented the condemned man until the end. The narrative hid a truth that shook the foundations of the official investigation. It was as if the shadows of that cell had not been taken with the body, as if the darkness persisted, beyond death, beyond human logic. The feeling was that something or someone, an invisible presence, continued to whisper, manipulate, plan. This revelation opened a new abyss in the minds of researchers, the curious and especially those who believed that the end of life was also the end of history. But the mystery never dies. It metamorphoses. It transforms into muffled sighs, into anonymous letters, into almost imperceptible traces that invite us on an even deeper, more intricate journey, where the hidden truth mixes with lies, manipulations, and mind games. The impact of this letter was a turning point that no one could have foreseen, a wide-open door to the unknown, an invitation to question everything. The mindset behind this new enigma is a labyrinth. Who sent that letter? What invisible forces were behind it? Were they voices from the past? Echoes of the convicted man's troubled mind, or an even darker plot orchestrated by someone lurking behind the scenes? Each written word was a clue, a fragment of a parallel reality that was beginning to emerge from the shadows, challenging the common perception of justice and truth. The letter was not just a message, it was a provocation, a silent challenge, to anyone who dared to go beyond the surface. What this letter revealed cannot be understated. It was an invitation to delve into the dark side of human transformation, where decisions made are not limited to life or death, but extend to the realm of the mind, of the hidden power that some carry and others fear. This journey touches the core of the human condition, in those moments when the line between victim and perpetrator becomes blurred, and the truth hides in almost impenetrable shadows. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what came after the execution was not just a distant echo, it was a provocation, a mystery that challenged all certainties. The letter brought to light revelations that shook the structure of the official narrative, undid truths that were considered solid, and opened space for conflicting versions, for the pain hidden between the lines, for the trauma that does not go away even after the end. It is an invitation to explore the backstage of this story, the untold secrets, the voices that insist on whispering beyond death, the transformation of certainties into profound doubts. This new layer of mystery reveals that sometimes final decisions do not end the cycle, but merely begin it in a different way. The impact of these revelations goes beyond the surface, stirring perception, instigating the mind to seek connections, to dismantle narratives. It is a game of shadows where each piece has a hidden meaning, a veiled intention, a truth that remains lurking. The mystery is not dead. It has reinvented itself. And in this reinvention, the line between reality and illusion becomes blurred, opening space for questions that will not be silenced. Who really holds the power of these voices? How do they continue to influence even when everything seemed over? The journey to unravel these answers is only beginning, and the impact of this new phase is as disturbing as it is essential to understanding what really happened. Comment: I'm on this journey too. If you've come this far, it's because you're looking to understand what goes beyond the surface. And that journey doesn't stop now. This space is made for those who want more than easy answers, for those who want to feel the impact of each hidden truth, uncover the layers, behind decisions and see behind the scenes of things that few dare to look at. If this makes sense to you, stay with me. Leave a "I'm with you" until the end here in the comments. I want to know who is on this real quest. If this dive brought you any connection, a touch of unease, or even a new perspective, leave a like. It's the silent way of acknowledging this exchange, this invisible thread that we create as we explore these deep and disturbing stories together. And there's more to come. There's a video here that complements everything we've talked about, which will take you even deeper into this universe where nothing is what it seems. Click on it, stay with me there, because what comes next is, without a doubt, an essential part of this journey.